For the last few weeks, we've been looking at the 7 churches written in the book of Revelation. Over these weeks, we've known a few things about this book. We know that the book of Revelation was written by the Apostle John, the one that was called the Beloved, the best friend of Jesus, the one that Jesus laid his head against at the Last Supper. It was written by John while he was in prison on the island of Patmos. We believe that it was written between the years AD 92 and 96, because this was a time of great persecution throughout the Roman Empire against the church because of a new emperor, the Emperor Domitian, who demanded emperor worship. Throughout the emperor, he called all people to an act of loyalty to him by calling him king and God. John refused to do this, and so he was in prison. We know that during these letters, that each of these letters follows a similar pattern. They are all written in the same way. They start in the same words. They say, to the angel of the church in whatever the city is, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamon, Thyatira. And he says, these are the words of. And we have a description of the one who says the words, a description of the glorified Jesus. And then Jesus says, I know you. I know your church. I know your hearts. I know your lives. I know your thoughts. I know everything about you. The good and the bad. He knows. And even when there is all good, when there are so many good things, often in these letters, he continues with the phrase, yet I hold this against you. There is some failing, some weakness, some alloy, something mixed in to take away from the purity of the faith. Many of the churches had something impure among them. He gives a warning and instructions, and he gives a promise to hold true to those who hold true to the faith. Over the last few weeks, we've looked at the churches in Ephesus, the church in Smyrna, in Pergamum, and today we will look at the church of Thyatira, at the letters that was written by John and sent to this church, the words that Jesus said to this church. And looking at this church, we will see also what Jesus says to us in our situation, what he says to us individually, what he says to us as a church. All of these churches, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, they're in the same area, the west of Turkey, what is now the western part of Turkey. And at that time it was called the province of Asia. Ephesus, we know, was a port city. Smyrna was also a port city, very wealthy cities. Pergamum was a center of the Roman government in that area. And Thyatira was something different, another important city in that area. One of the things about the city of Thyatira that caused Jesus to write with the words that he did was that it was a center for worship to a particular god. The god Apollo, one of the gods from the Greek mythology. Their particular focus within that city was that they belonged to Apollo. They would focus their worship in this direction. So when Jesus introduced himself in the letter and said who he was, he said in verse 18 to the angel of the church in Thyatira, write, these are the words of the Son of God, whose eyes are like blazing fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. Why does he have to remind them of this? In the whole book of Revelation, this is the only time that he calls himself the Son of God. The emperor at that time was Domitian. Domitian was worshipped in the city of Thyatira and in other places as Apollo. Apollo was called the son of Zeus, the son of the father of the gods, of the Greek gods. So he was thought to be the son of the father of the gods. This was a title that Domitian claimed for himself. This was the way that Thyatira worshipped him, as Apollo, as the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, he is not. I am the Son of God. Domitian even had coins printed, coins made about his son, where his son was holding 7 stars. And the son of Domitian was given the title Son of God on that coin. And Jesus said, this is a lie. This is not true. There is only one Son of God. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus goes on to talk about the church in Thyatira, and again he says, I know. I know your deeds, your love and faith, your service and perseverance, and that you are doing more than you did at first. He's writing to a good church. Look at the things that he's saying about them. He knows the things that they do, the things that they work hard at, the things that they have done in Jesus' name as a church representing him in this world. He knows their love and he knows their faith. He knows their service and their perseverance, even during times of persecution, even in times of difficulty, that they persevere. And he knows that they are growing. They are doing more than they did before. They are not forgetting, turning away and forgetting their first love of Jesus. Instead, they are doing more. They are a growing church. The love of God is growing in their hearts. And they are reaching out to people, sharing love, sharing faith. A good church. And yet still, as Jesus writes to so many of the other cities, he writes those words, I have this against you. Even though it's a good church, growing church, doing more than they did in the beginning, a church of faith, a church of love, a church of perseverance, a church of deeds. And yet he says, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman, Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. Jezebel. Where does this name come from? When you read the Old Testament, her name appears quite often in the conflict with Elijah. The woman, the princess, married to King Ahab. And she introduced something. She introduced worship of a foreign god, worship of Baal. We don't think that her real name was Jezebel. Instead, it was something related to Baal, dedicated to Baal. And the Jews changed the name to be something meaning without honor. They changed the name slightly. If you're Chinese and you want to have an English name, let me give you a little